This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Well, hey, everyone, it's Mark Bayer, and thank you so much for being along for this episode of When Science Speaks. The episode is sponsored by Bayer Strategic Consulting in Washington, D.C., which helps scientists get funding, gain influence, and build strategic relationships with the stakeholders who matter most in their professional lives. And that journey often involves being able to effectively translate complicated research into engaging jargon-free communication that captures the attention of general audiences. So if you are interested in that and would like a free resource to help you do just that, simply go to complexitymadeclear.com to get the 11 keys for translating complexity. That's complexitymadeclear.com. It's a free infographic used by science communicators at major organizations to boil down, but not dumb down, the complicated science and technical topics for key audiences of non-experts. Well, it is so great and such a wonderful pleasure to have Dr. Liane Clamen on the show today. Liane is an ophthalmologist, and she's also the founder and CEO of Adaptilens, which is an intraocular lens, or an IOL in the trade, that imitates the human lens, so patients will have near, intermediate, and also distance vision without eyeglasses or contact lenses. Liane is an inventor of an accommodative IOL, as well as also an inventor of a drug delivery system for the treatment of glaucoma, and also a device that's used in cataract surgery. In addition to being founder and CEO, Liane also is a lecturer at Harvard Medical School, where she teaches first-year med students during their professional development weeks. Liane earned her BA and her MD at Harvard University and completed her training at the Harvard Ophthalmology residency program, and that's at Massachusetts Eye and Ear. Welcome to the show, Liane. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Now, as I mentioned in the bio, you were an English and American literature major as an undergrad at Harvard, and then you ended up going on to Harvard Medical School and getting your MD. Would love for you to share how your interest in medicine developed.
Yes, well, I had a fairly circuitous path to a career in medicine. I was an English major undergrad and thought I would go on to academia. But I ended up taking a year after college. I was lucky enough to get a Pforzheimer Fellowship from Harvard, and I traveled to India to teach Tibetan refugees at the Tibetan Jesus village. So suddenly, I was living in rural India, and this was back in 1991. And living in rural India at that time, I encountered many people with incurable, debilitating diseases like leprosy and tuberculosis. And actually the father of the dorm that I lived in as a young teacher there, I lived in the girls' student dorm. Mm-hmm. And Paula was a well-respected teacher and father of the dorm. And he actually died while I was there. And nobody really knew, what killed him. And that's just sort of how it was in rural India. You didn't necessarily get a diagnosis when you were ill or even, after death. People just accepted that there were things that were incurable. So while I was in India, I thought, I have one life, and the biggest impact I can make with this one life is to be a physician. So I kind of changed course, and I ended up applying for a program where I could finish my pre-med requirements. And that was at Bryn Mawr. They have a great one-year program. So I finished my pre-med requirements. Then I worked for a year in Washington, D.C. while I applied to medical school, and then ended up coming back up here for medical school. So it was not what I had originally set out to do when I started college, but certainly was the right choice for me.
I really appreciate that story. So vivid and talking about wanting to make the biggest impact possible. So such a sentiment that's shared by so many of us. Not all med students were biology majors, for example, in college. And I'm wondering whether being an English major, when you got to med school, of course, you had done the program that you mentioned, a post-bac program at Bryn Mawr. But I'm wondering whether being an English major posed any special challenges in med school, and also kind of looking at it in the opposite way, whether you had whether you had advantages that maybe classmates didn't have, those classmates maybe didn't have the intensive writing and communication training and expertise that you had developed.
Yeah, so you're right. Actually, early in my training, it posed almost a challenge because it made me very inefficient when I loved hearing patients' stories. So I can remember spending too much time with patients when I was just learning how to be a physician. And I quickly learned how to become more efficient and delve a little bit less into the stories of their lives. But later, I think my background as an English major really provided me with a big advantage in that I enjoyed writing. I can write well. And so I ended up collaborating with both mentors and colleagues on a lot of journal articles and textbook chapters. And in fact, the idea for Adaptilens came to me after I co-authored a textbook chapter on the history of intraocular lenses. So I was able to research every IOL that had been invented and been on the market. And after I wrote the chapter, I realized that nobody had tried to imitate the natural lens and create a soft, flexible lens like we have in our own eyes. And that set me off on this new path of trying to figure out how to do that. So it was a real advantage to write and to delve into these new research areas.
It's so interesting too, when you had this insight that no one had really sort of looked to nature in this way. Sometimes I feel like there are a lot of structures and processes that happen in nature that we sometimes learn from when we're doing something that, might be related to the life sciences. And sometimes we don't pay as much attention to those things. At this point, I want to ask you, because so many people do not have both of these skills and abilities that you have with respect to being a successful inventor that you are, as well as an entrepreneur. Also, I wanted to congratulate you because you were just recently named by the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center as a 2021 winner in their Massachusetts Next Generation initiative. And that's a competitive program which supports women entrepreneurs and early stage life sciences companies. So congratulations straight away for that. But it leads into my question, which is, I've always thought of inventors as people who are able to imagine novel ways of achieving improved results, and entrepreneurs as being able to actually implement them. Of course, those are fuzzy lines, but I would really enjoy hearing, and I know our listeners would too, hearing your thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and thank you. I think a lot of people come up with creative ideas. I believe it's part of human nature. I mean, I have 4 children. Mark, I know you have kids too. And when kids are young, many of them come up with creative and innovative, solutions to problems. So I think that we have that in us. I think that to be a good inventor and a good entrepreneur, it's almost like an overlap of the Venn diagram, that it's not enough to just have a good idea. You have to know how to research it to see if it's a truly novel idea, to see if it's something that's even possible. And then you have to have the entrepreneur's perseverance and optimism in order to really see it through. And in a way, I'm also lucky that I've been born into this time period, because I think material science is catching up, so that these ideas that we have, we can now see them through because there are new materials out there that make these things possible.
So interesting. And actually, as I think about it, we talked about, you being a skilled entrepreneur and inventor, and then also having the English and the science in one, persona, so to speak, which is really rare. And earlier in your career, you were an ophthalmology resident at Mass Eye, as we talked about, and you've also been an ophthalmic consultant. When you were talking about India and you were talking about these different diseases that you witnessed while you were there doing your fellowship, probably saw some that related to the eye. I guess what I would ask is what draws you to specialize in this particular area?
Mm-hmm. So my mother actually, from the time I was young, she taught visually impaired children. She was a special ed teacher and ended up being director of early childhood education at the Lighthouse for the Blind in New York City. So I grew up with a big awareness of the importance of vision and I guess a gratitude to be able to see well. I guess most kids don't really think about that on a daily basis, but having a mom come home and talk about how she was teaching, blind infants, I thought about it more than most people. So when I was in medical school, I was lucky enough to do a rotation in fourth year of my medical school at the Mass Eye and Ear Infirmary, just because of my interest in ophthalmology and in eyes. And sure enough, my first week there, I thought, wow, this is really what I want to do. And I think in ophthalmology, one of sort of bread and butter, the surgeries that many ophthalmologists do is cataract surgery, because if people live long enough, they develop cataracts. The lens inside their eye becomes thick and opaque, and we call it a cataract. And then we remove the cataract and replace it with an intraocular lens. But patients are so grateful when they've been walking around with fuzzy vision, really poor vision for years, and then you fix them. So I really liked that instant gratification, and that's something you don't get in many areas of medicine. I think when I was doing internal medicine rotations, I would see chronic disease. And I guess maybe it takes a different personality to have the patience for that. And somehow I liked the fact that with ophthalmology, you could sort of cure people or help them, and they could see clearly after just one surgery. So I loved that aspect of it.
So interesting. That makes so much sense. It's true. Making such a immediate impact that changes people's lives. Very, very interesting. Many of our listeners are interested in entrepreneurship, and I'm wondering if you would share some advice that you might have for those who may be thinking about joining a startup or launching a startup. You talked about perseverance when you referenced entrepreneurs. Absolutely, that's such an important trait for all of us, I think, as we go through life, but for entrepreneurs as well. Wondering if you have any thoughts about that or any particular resources that you might suggest, skills or attributes, training, or anything like that along those lines for someone listening who is thinking that they'd like to explore working or launching a startup.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could certainly pass on some good advice that was given to me. So the year that I was working in Washington, D.C. And applying to medical school, I worked at the Association for American Medical Colleges. And one of the older gentlemen there was Ed Stemler, and he had been dean of medicine at UPenn. And he was a really friendly guy. And once I asked him how he could take on, how he was successful at such a big role with so many responsibilities. And he said, you have to surround yourself with good people. You can't do everything. So the most important thing you can do is to choose good people to have around you. And that's what I've been able to do at Adaptilens, is really find not just brilliant and innovative thinkers, but good humans who I like to interact with. And so I think for anyone considering starting a company, the first most important thing is to try to find other people that you enjoy spending time with, that you can trust, and who are skilled at what they do. And then in terms of resources, I mean, we're so lucky here in Boston that there's so many fantastic resources from the Capital Network, which is a nonprofit that has classes about cap tables and just sort of basic things that entrepreneurs encounter, to the Mass Challenge, which is an accelerator program that I was lucky enough to be in last year. And they have mentors and colleagues that you can learn a lot from. So the Boston area is certainly ripe with opportunities to learn and help grow startups.
And, as you know, too, there are many areas around the country that have things like that, organizations like that, too. So folks can, I guess, and I would say around the world, of course, also being from Massachusetts, I'm partial to what we've got going on when it comes to things like this. But seriously, these are organizations, sometimes quasi-government organizations, or fully supported by federal or state funding that many people can find wherever they happen to be. As we look towards the future, we're approaching the fourth quarter, unbelievably, of 2021. And I wonder if you'd share with listeners what you see as being next for your company, Adaptilens, and also whether you have any non-work related goals for 2022 you'd like to share.
Thank you. So Adaptilens is, we're now performing our proof of concept studies, and we've gotten good results. So we will continue to do these and hope that we have reproducibly good results in the future. So that's a big milestone that we hope to achieve over the next couple of months. And non-work related goals. Well, I have 4 amazing children, and they've been patient with me these past few years as Adaptilens has become like another child. I've spent so much time growing this company. So hopefully I'll also be able to balance work-life issues more and spend even more quality time with the kiddos.
Wonderful. What a great role model for everyone. The innovation, the entrepreneurship, this creative thinking, and it does make such a huge impact. And, I'm wishing you and Adaptilens a lot of luck as you proceed, because as you pointed out, giving somebody back better sight is a life changer, and there's no bigger impact than that you can make.
Thank you, Mark.
Dr. Liane Clamen has been such a wonderful guest, and thank you, listeners, also for being along with us on this episode of When Science Speaks. And I hope you will be back next time for the next episode of When Science Speaks.
This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.